What it do, it's your boy DSly, coming to you with another reflection. It's been a minute, my schedule's changed drastically, and it's kind of hard to find an open window to record or even do interviews or anything like that, so I'm still adjusting, but things are still going well. We still have a lot of perspectives to go from the Stu Schwager interview, so yeah, we're into our fifth wave in the podcast. The first wave, I posted information on the Saginaw Heritage High School Class of 2000 Facebook page to try to spark a little kindling. That went well, but before I was even able to post, there was a little bit of controversy, so that wave kind of sizzled out, and that kindling that I had put in the middle of the fire didn't really ignite the way that I could have done it. Now I learned my lesson. You gotta be careful. These are new times. People can get canceled, so now I learned my lesson to say less. But then I went to the second wave. The second wave was when I started to post on my own personal page, and that got its own level of interest. There wasn't as much energy from those posts as it was from the initial first wave, because my plan was to have the energy from the first wave carry on over to the second wave, and unfortunately the second wave became the first wave. But the third wave, I set out, by the third wave I was almost done with the podcast, but I took another approach and I started to send people private messages. Started to respond to people who had sent me private messages more actively, and I started to kind of build a relationship with people one-on-one in regards to the podcast. And by that time I was kind of done with the first plan for the podcast. At that point it was just really for me. Before it was like for everyone, but now it's kind of evolved into something that is between me and the people willing to participate, and it's been a great experience that way, actually. And now I kind of wish that I would have began at that way, because I could have avoided certain disappointments and things like that. But yeah, the third wave was sending personal messages, and just because I sent someone a message didn't mean they actually tuned into the podcast or anything like that. But it was good to get feedback. It was good to see who's on your side, who's not on your side. You just got a lot of information that way. It was good to catch up with people and reestablish relationships with everyone that I had talked to. And some people, got cut out. Some people, I don't think anyone like blocked or unfriended or anything like that, but it was kind of like a goodbye conversation too. So, but after the third wave, we got into Chrissy's perspective, which was probably the most successful, just because of her disability to, and without the technical difficulties and things like that, but her ability to just lay it all out there and speak so sincerely about what she had been going through the whole process of her life in Saginaw. And her perspective started to create word of mouth, spreading of the word. Individuals started to speak in the background to other individuals about the podcast, and I started to get new personal messages from people who I didn't expect to hear from. And from the word of mouth wave, it spilled into the fifth wave, which was where from that moment it had always been mostly Class of 2000 that tuned in, a few coaches, a few parents, but mainly it was a Class of 2000 that was listening to the podcast. But from the word of mouth, the fifth wave created where new classes started to get involved, especially the class of 99, a year ahead of us. I haven't heard much from the younger classes, if I can remember correctly, but a few older classes started to get involved. And of course with Stu, he's a public figure, he's a celebrity. People still wear his jersey. People might even have like his number tattooed on their body or something like that. He's that big of a deal. So people outside of the Saginaw circle are starting to tune in to the podcast also, which is awesome. So yeah, we'll see what happens next. What's going to be the sixth wave? I don't know, but I hope we can keep the energy going forward. Maybe the sixth wave will be those people we lost in the first wave jumping on board. I hope so, but we'll see what happens. Still have some plans for the next interviews. Hopefully we can get them scheduled and keep this thing going a little longer. Now we're in volume 2. So yeah, the big topic of debate, not debate maybe, but the major theme that's been kind of hovering in the air since the beginning of the podcast, to be honest, but it really kind of showed its face a lot throughout the Chrissy interview, Chrissy conversation, and that's the subject of grace. And that's what I've seen personally, from my perspective, is what I've seen kind of hover over everyone's life, from good to bad. There's always been this kind of like level of grace that's like kept us from falling over the edge or even feeling ourselves too much, keeping us in check at all times. And it's to the point, it's like, wow, grace is something like, what is grace though? And grace is, the way I look at it at least, it's undeserved forgiveness. Undeserved forgiveness of a debt that we have, an individual has, that gets paid off without us having to do anything. It's just forgiven, have your debt forgiven. So when I look at Mercy's conversation in perspective 1, she was going through some crazy stuff at home. It was just wild, but there was this grace that like held her up, that didn't like break her. She could have had a great excuse to just be broken and maybe take her own life, but she held on by some kind of invisible power, invisible strength, grace. That debt of shame that was bound to plague her life was paid off somehow, and that's just amazing. And in the second perspective, I think we were dealing with Brad, and that's just the grace to keep pushing forward. I don't think we really touched on it enough, the struggles he's had as a professional. Actually, he's the third perspective. I did 2 women in a row. I wanted to alternate, but I guess I didn't alternate back then. But still, keeping with Brad, the grace to keep pushing forward through what seems like an impossible profession to pursue, especially if you don't know anyone. You come from Saginaw, which is crazy, to make it onto a show like Billions, or to be in some of the bigger theater shows he's been, and just continue to just push forward, to have enough grace to push forward. And you look at Taria's story, which still to me is just very tragic to me, is that despite everything, she continues to be herself. She continues to pursue what it means to be herself, and she doesn't give up, even though the world has been against her so much, basically from before the day she was born. And I think that amount of grace that she's been given is amazing, And of course with Chrissy, oh man, it's tough, because her words really stick with me when she talks about, a lot of people have the worst part of their life during their early 20s after high school, but for her it wasn't like that. It was in her 30s, and she said that's way harder. It's like, where is the grace in that? And the beautiful thing with Chrissy is that there's no grace in that. You have to find that grace yourself, in yourself, despite everything that you've been through, just everything you've lost, all the struggles you've had. You find the grace for yourself, to forgive yourself each and every day, and to love yourself every day. It's just, I don't know how you can make it otherwise, You have to forgive yourself, even if it's not deserved, even if you didn't pay off the debt. You have to give yourself that grace and continue to push forward. And to me, that's just awesome. And the Stu story, we're not done with it. Maybe I shouldn't maybe I shouldn't expose the secret of how grace has played out in his life, but I really just see grace in his life, and maybe I don't think that he actually fully understands the kind of role that grace plays in his life also. Maybe he won't come to that realization through the podcast process like Chrissy did, because Chrissy kind of saw it right away in the interview, but with Stu it was a different experience, a completely different experience. But I won't say too much on that because we're still going through it. I don't want to spoil the mystery or anything like that. But yeah, sticking with Stu, the interview with him was just, that's crazy because again, that's a public figure. That's someone who's made millions of dollars in entertainment and sports, which is crazy. Who's pushed to the highest level. I mean, I guess it's like with Brad too. He's pushed to the highest level too. But yeah, Stu is like the real deal. It's kind of crazy that I got a chance to interview him, even though he's my best friend. But there was no easy task. I really give a shout out to people who like successfully interviewed people like Mike Tyson or I don't know, what's his name, Sean Evans on Hot Ones. He's dealt with some shy celebrities, and Graham Benzinger. He's done a lot of sports interviews a lot of times. I think he's dealt with Dennis Rodman, someone who I really idolize. But those are not easy interviews. I had this, as the interview went on, it just kind of like, I started to think about like, man, this guy, how did he came exactly where we came from? What was that moment of separation? What separated him from me? I didn't think he was necessarily a better athlete than me or anything like that, but at some point there was separation. That moment where he's lined up at the state finals. State finals was crazy. I still didn't understand what speed was. I still didn't understand what running really was. And there he was lined up, and the gun goes off, and he's out. And right behind him, nipping on his heels, is one of the greatest athletes ever to grace this generation, Charles Rogers. And he just pulls ahead, and he pulls forward, and he takes the state championship, which I don't think anyone would have imagined. I mean, I wonder, I have to talk to Coach Rostello. Did he really think that Stu had a chance? He was encouraging him like he did, and his eyes said he did, but did he really think that Stu had a chance to win that race? And it was like that moment, I was like, man, they're like, I'm like kind of like examining Rogers. Is something wrong with him? Is he injured? It's like, no, he was completely disappointed, and Stu had beat him fair and square, and that was just awesome. I mean, he had been beating him out of the blocks, I don't know, at least for the last year, maybe longer, but Rogers would always catch him. But look, he made it look easy. Who knows? I remember there was this moment in the relay, I think it was a 4x2, and we were just out on him. And the anchor leg was Stu and Rogers, and Stu was out at least 20 meters on him, and Rogers caught him, man. And at that moment, it's like, yeah, you can't beat this guy. And then to come back maybe a year later and beat this guy in the 100-meter state final, set the record for Division I, even though it's our first year, it's still a record-setting performance. It's just, yeah, I want to, how did you get to that moment where you just kind of separated yourself from us, How did you rise above Saginaw and make it and be slungshot that far? And I did get the answer, I think. I really did get the answer, but I don't think that Stu has come to the complete realization how all that works. And I think it's going to be good for him if he ever does come to that realization. But right now, maybe he's not in that kind of headspace yet, because later, I don't know if we'll even get to it, but later he went through some really traumatizing things that it's kind of hard to look through all the muck and the mire and the mess and look clearly on one's life when you've been through a lot of stuff, a lot of traumatizing things later on in life. Again, that's why I applaud Chrissy. She's been through some stuff. She's done some dumb things, man. And you gotta look back on that and forgive yourself and come to an understanding of yourself. It's hard, because I've done some dumb things, and some things I didn't walk away from too well, and I hope I have a chance to tell you guys about it sometime. But yeah, so yeah, I think that was long again. I didn't mean to make it long. But lastly, people have been asking about my interview. When am I gonna give my own perspective on my life and on Saginaw? And I don't know. I really doubt I'll have a chance to give my own perspective anytime soon. But I try my best to slip a few things in every now and then. I did that too much with Stu, and it kind of backfired. But we'll see later down the road how I'll be able to tell my story someday and be able to share it with you. But I do have 2 memoirs that I'm working on, so stay tuned to that too. One is called The Walking Book. It's about my relationship with walking. And another one is called Black Father. It's about my father's story, but you can see bits of me through that story too. So anyways, the show must go on. We're gonna keep going, you know. We're still looking at the same thing. We're all looking at the same thing. We're all looking at the same thing. Sag Nasty, baby. I'm out.